Hello, everyone. Welcome. Happy Wednesday. I am thrilled to be joined by our guest speakers today. I'm Elizabeth. I am part of the sales organization here with Uptempo. Before we kick it off, for those of you who might not be familiar, last year, 3 companies, Allocadia, Hive9, and Brightmaker, operating in the marketing performance and resource management space, came together to address a challenge and gap in the market, which is how can we better support marketing organizations globally more efficiently run the business of marketing. And so when we think about the tools and technologies available to marketers today, there are no shortage of technologies that help support the execution and tactical side of marketing. But when it comes to the foundation, which we regard as strategic planning, budget management, performance management, a lot of companies are still struggling to demonstrate business impact because those processes are still, for the most part, manually managed and outdated. So one of the things that has come up over the last year, actually since I got to meet Monica for the first time, around this time last year, I was introduced to the marketing chief of staff role. And since then, I've been intrigued to learn more about what this role means within the marketing organization. And this is why I'm really excited to be joined by all of you today. For the audience, we welcome any questions. So feel free to post them in the chat panel, and we'll be sure to bring those up. All right, so let's get into it. One of the things that has stood out to me the most is just the diversity of background and experience for the marketing chief of staff today. So we'd love to understand your experiences and how you all came to be in this role. Cameron, do you want to kick us off?
Sure, absolutely. So Cameron Gazian, I'm head of marketing operation analytics and chief of staff to the CMO at Ciena. To give you a very quick overview, Ciena is a telecom equipment vendor, a public company, about 7,000 employees, $3.7 billion in revenue, headquartered in Maryland with obviously presence globally. How did I ended up in this role? From an engineering background, so right out of school, I did some engineering. From there, I moved to sales, to the front end of the business. But what really led to this role was about 10 years ago when I switched to the operations side on the COO front. And about 4.5, 5 years ago, as we were really scaling up the marketing organization, there was an opportunity to scale up the marketing operations function. Started there, and as we'll probably discuss today, kind of a natural evolution. Maturity of marketing operations has led me to have this dual role of continuing to manage the operations, but also serve as a chief of staff to our CMO.
Okay, thank you. Monica?
Sure, yeah, Monica Ulmer, chief of staff here at Protegrity. I've been at Protegrity now just shy of 3 years. Protegrity is a global data security company that offers a wide range of solutions, anywhere from format preserving, encryption, all the way to vaultless tokenization, anonymization, pseudonymization solutions for some of these sticky and tough compliance requirements that we need to get through. As well as offering, the ability for the business side to accelerate and be enabled in order to use some of that sensitive data. But prior to joining Protegrity here, I actually came from an IT organization and working obviously in the operations side over there, but it was very focused on software implementation, anything from a full-blown end-to-end SAP implementation, working with supply chain, finance, C-suite steering committee, and then also moving into a homegrown IT solution for inside sales team and incident management and all of those, high profile areas in IT that require a lot of attention. Back in 2020, Protegrity reached out to me, and seeing that it was a very focused data security company, I was very intrigued and very interested in coming over. Although it was in a marketing operations role, that was a little bit new to me, but I was eager to jump at that opportunity. Back in 2021, we had a new CMO join the team, and when he and the CEO were reviewing the org chart, one of the positions that surfaced that he felt was a required role for the success of the team was a chief of staff role. And the interesting part here, and I mentioned this in a different conversation with Cameron, is that we're a very small company in contrast to some of the other orgs that have chief of staffs. But we decided that that was a good direction to go. And I was fortunate enough to have my name surface in that conversation and have been loving it ever since.
Yeah, and one of the things that I really want to communicate to the audience and for anyone that is interested in potentially exploring this role for themselves or within their organizational structure is that it doesn't so much have to do with the size and complexity of your organization, more around the maturity within your marketing organization and overall, like, the business's perception of marketing within the entire company. So all that to say, yes, we do see chief of staff in large enterprises across B2B and B2C, but that's not to say that smaller organizations will not be bringing those types of roles on. Yeah. Hari.
Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you. I'm Hari. I'm the Chief of Staff to the CMO at Splunk. Splunk is a global technology company that provides security and observability solutions, and it's underpinned by a unified platform. We are about $3 billion in revenue, ARR, and have been in existence for over 15 years. So prior to becoming the Chief of Staff to the CMO, I had actually built my career in corporate strategy. I kind of come from a management consulting background, did several corporate strategy roles at multiple tech companies. And I realized that what I liked the most across the broad stroke of projects and the variety that I was working on was actually go-to-market. I did, the very high level 3-year strategy for the highest level exec teams to thinking through our workforce solutions and a ton of work on the sales strategy side. And I really learned that, I love the impact that I was making in the go-to-market side. And the art of B2B technology is the fact that you have customers that are paying a lot of money for your solutions. And really thinking through that was probably one of the most interesting aspects about my time in corporate strategy and working on go-to-market projects. After having done that, what I wanted to really pivot into was build a functional depth. So I did a quick stint in go-to-market operations, leading M&A integration and PMOing a lot of different programs within go-to-market operations organization. And then I kind of think of this charter or this new path of my career as sort of my career 2.0 in marketing. And I wanted to really build that expertise within go-to-market. So when the opportunity came up to be the Chief of Staff to the CMO here at Splunk, I was really excited about the role. And I've been in the role for about less than a quarter. So I'm fairly new to the role. And I'm looking forward to sharing about all that I've learned drinking through the fire hose at Splunk. And that's why I decided to take the leap into the Chief of Staff role in marketing.
All right, thank you, everyone. Dan, although Dan is not a Chief of Staff, Dan and I have been working closely to find better ways to support and anticipate the needs of marketing leaders and their teams moving into, especially next year, as we can all imagine, it's going to be a dynamic year for marketing overall. So Dan, take this opportunity to just introduce yourself.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and everyone. I'm Dan Radu, and I run Macro Agency. Macro is a global marketing operations partner to the Chief of Staff role. We specialize in marketing automation platforms and Salesforce CRM. Global marketing teams come to us to be an extension of their team. And I've been running an agency for 9 years, and my background is in marketing jobs, tech jobs, and operations, and many projects with our big clients. Over the years, I've had the decision makers at the client sides, from director of marketing operations to VP of marketing operations, and now chief of staff. So very nice to see this progression.
Yeah, agreed. And although not always the case, what we are seeing is the rise of strategic marketing operations, and very organically, folks in marketing operations having this as a potential next step within their career path, which we'll talk more about later on. But one thing I want to ask next is, right now, it's a pretty, like I said before, dynamic, interesting time for marketing. And knowing that the role and the mandate of today's CMO has changed so dramatically, especially over the last 5 years, why do you feel the marketing chief of staff now is a rising role, and why we will continue to see more organizations adopt this resource as in support of the office of the CMO? Hari, do you want to take that one away?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. So to me, this question really has to do with the fact that the role and mandate of the CMO has been so dynamic in the past 5 years across the industry. And as we think about several factors contributing that, there are 3 that I can think of. First being pandemic really accelerating the digital transformation of companies, and the critical role that marketing has played in driving that transformation has been tremendous across the past couple of years. And secondly, marketing's role as a driver of tangible business performance, as well as real business metrics that CMOs are now held accountable for. One of a preconceived notion into marketing before coming into the role that I had was marketing just does brand and fluffy stuff. But actually, in reality, there are so many metrics, analytics, and true business results that CMOs are accountable for, as well as their teams. I think that's probably one of the important factors as well. And lastly, also just around macroeconomic landscape, having built my career after one of the huge recessions, and seeing kind of this market landscape has been very dynamic for me, and that's really forcing companies to be creative with the way they deploy their every single investment they have, whether it be marketing program dollars as well as or it may be the headcount, and they are trying to do that to extract the most business impact on their investment. So the net of that is CMOs actually needs to juggle across all of these different various factors that are changing the landscape, that are changing the industry and the world at large. And another interesting factor that me coming into a role in a more of a recent past is the fact that marketing is just not marketing. It's actually a true federated function, meaning marketing is defined by a variety of sub-functions under the overall marketing umbrella. There's communications, there's brand and creative, there's content, product marketing, operations, there's regional and field marketing, there's also customer marketing. Across all of these various aspects of marketing, CMOs may really need to think about having a chief of staff to help them balance the agenda, as well as driving a tight leadership team, which is one of the mandate that I have as a chief of staff to the CMO that I support.
Yeah, and I think you kind of knocked it on the head, where for so many years, marketing has been perceived as the creative arm of the business, establishing brand awareness and all of that. However, as we've seen the progression of marketing transforming from a cost center to a revenue center of excellence, we're seeing the teams, for example, across growth, across demand generation, have more unique challenges. But I can see that in the chief of staff role, you guys are so instrumental in creating alignment, not only between those departments, those field events, digital, demand gen, et cetera, but also across cross functions such as finance, such as product, et cetera. Monica?
Yeah, I would agree with the majority of what Hari has mentioned. In my role, and what I have been seeing across the board is that alignment, Elizabeth, that you just spoke to. And we have to be accountable for every dollar spent, and making sure that we have ROI to show for those dollars that have been spent. And we have to be accountable with both the revenue team and with the finance team, making sure that we can convey that, whether it's with data, driven metrics and so forth. And if it's not performing, we need to know how to pivot fast, right? And so that has certainly been a focus area that we've had to make, especially as you mentioned, Hari, with the pandemic and, whatever the future holds for 2023.
I would obviously agree with all those. The 2 points I would add that I think have justified this role or accelerated in the past few years is one, again, as part of the acceleration that COVID has brought, the sales cycle and the interworking between sales and marketing has greatly changed. It's no longer the marketing goes so far and there's a handoff to sales and we're done. The sales cycle now has touch point from sales and marketing all across. So that brings a whole new level of interaction cross-functionally. And another point is, I think even outside of marketing, if you look over the past probably 5 to 10 years, there has been a special focus on biz ops and operation. I think we went for a very long time on focusing on strategy. Strategy was the do-it-all and everything was strategic deal. We got it, but we realized that, well, strategy without execution is just a plan on paper. And we've seen that rise of biz ops across the board, and especially on marketing as well, based on the changes we just talked about.
Yeah, interesting enough. So I do see that a lot of many chiefs of staff that I've come across and connected with over the past year or so have had previous roles, for example, like Hari, corporate strategy, strategic operations, where they are right there at the intersection of all domains, and again, being that connective tissue. So one of the, let's break it up a little bit. Hi, Michael Hartman, nice to see you. Michael has a question. What are the most common responsibilities for a marketing chief of staff? And does marketing ops typically fall under this role or another?
I'll go maybe based on experience. In our case, it was an evolution of marketing ops. I could see this role being individual contributor. However, it'll probably be the most connected with marketing ops in that case, because I think marketing ops does drive a lot of stuff that the chief of staff would bring a lot of value to. And in terms of responsibility, I think we can go all over the place. To me, one of the highest priority stuff is executive alignment. As we talk, the role of CMO has grown and the scope has grown, and to bring that lateral alignment across the marketing leadership and cross-functionally is probably one of the key role that a good chief of staff brings to the CMO.
Yeah, and following up, and Monica, we'll go to you next. Kristen asked, what are your thoughts on the chief of staff being responsible for direct teams? Mm-hmm. And again, some parallels in the questions, but ultimately talk to us about the capacity of the chief of staff in supporting actual direct reports or versus the overall just alignment of those teams.
Yeah, I'm happy to take this question. So I actually do have a team that's reporting to me, and we're responsible for several things. One is actually driving marketing enablement, so enabling of the marketers within the organization that, typically what the people organization will have that within their L&D, learning and development teams, but there's something more specific to marketers that we actually drive. The second one is a strategic planning aspect, so driving the annual planning, operating planning, thinking through what are the key initiatives that marketing as an organization needs to sign up for. And then double clicking down further into what are each of the sub-marketing functions need to be responsible for, and interlocking that throughout the different levels of the organization. And then lastly, around just strategic operations and strategic projects that the CMO has mandated me to do, mandated my team to drive, that are outside the core responsibility of the marketing org. So I think the chief of staff, as Cameron mentioned, could be an individual contributor role that are very high influence role that really needs to drive that executive alignment. And in addition, there are natural extensions of the role that could drive some of the things that I've mentioned, as well as marketing operations. And just to add on the evolution of the role part, previously at Splunk, marketing chief of staff fell under marketing operations. But as the company grew and as some of the transformation that we all mentioned, it sort of kind of branched out and became a direct report to the CMO, driving some of the mandated things. So I think it's highly dependent on the org, highly dependent on how it's actually structured, but that's sort of the way I am driving my agenda within the marketing organization at Splunk.
Okay, Monica, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I think that it's interesting because it is very dependent on how the org structure is created. At Protegrity, we use this role as an individual contributor with high influence to make sure that we have that executive alignment and relationship management across the board, and making sure that we do have that strategic annual planning, budget management planning, all communicated across the board. So I think it is certainly evolving, as we all mentioned here today.
Yes, so let's actually stay on this topic of strategic planning, annual operating planning, and budget management. So if anyone does come across a job requisition or posting for a marketing chief of staff, one of the key roles and responsibilities is just that, having a close hand over strategic planning and budget management. So obviously this is very front and center for us as an organization, because when we think about a marketing organization's ability to run the business of marketing, it's very much tied to financial investments and being able to have the visibility to track where those budget dollars are being allocated and what the teams are choosing to invest in. Did you want to take us through what annual operating planning is like for you and your teams, and how your specific skill sets or mandates have been able to streamline and make that process much more efficient across the board? Cameron?
Sure. At a very, very top level, obviously, the way we work, we have a 3 to 5 year vision from which we build a strategic plan. And where we really play an important role is on the annual planning cycle, is what are the annual priorities that we do every year that will help us achieve the strategic plan and ultimately that vision. Why is budgeting and the operation part is very important? It's to have that agility. Like any other strategy, any plan we make, it's never set in stone. We know there's going to be changes that come out of way throughout the year that you need to continuously adjust to. And by its nature, marketing has a big part of discretionary spend. It's not just headcount. It's not things that just go. If you look at R&D department where headcount goes up and down, discretionary is limited. In marketing, a big portion is discretionary. And having that ability to do those puts and takes, those adjustments. If we see something performing well and we want to double down on it, well, where do I get that money? So having that live view, and I think again from operation, from a chief of staff, the advantage is you have that wide lens of you're seeing the whole org. Whereas each of the business function have obviously a more narrow view. So helping the CMO with that view of, all right, we need to double down here, but that agility only comes if you have a full view of the operating plan and really the budgets. Because if you got to add somewhere, you got to take it from somewhere else. And I think that's always the tough decision, but a necessary decision that has to be done throughout the year.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think it's really important to be able to articulate the business impact of marketing dollars, because marketing being probably the largest cost center, aside from the headcount, from just program dollar spend perspective, inevitably there will be a lot of questions and to an extent, a little bit of scrutiny around where is the dollar actually going and what is it actually getting us? Because if you think about the sales organization, you put a headcount in and you get the capacity out. And it's fairly simple, but marketing is not as straightforward as that in some areas of investment. In areas where we're actually driving pipeline and there are metrics being driven out of that, there will be, but some of the other areas it may not be. So helping the teams actually think through from an executive level, hey, what is the CEO or the executive team actually looking for? And how can we help our CMO articulate the value of marketing through the spend that we have and through the program investments that we make? And some of it, it may be more natural, like putting together a ton of events for the sales organization to drive that customer engagement and customer intimacy, but some of the areas it may not be. Being able to have that transparency and view across that, and helping the teams, really encouraging the teams to drive to that, not just asking for more dollars. I think that is probably one of the roles that we can play, having this overall marketing view as well.
Yeah, Monica?
Yeah, I would just add on top of that, that with some of the, complex go-to-market strategies that several of the different teams have, I would say that those dollars are watched carefully, and making sure that you've got something to show for some of the decisions that are made require a lot of budget oversight, making sure that we're clear with where we can accelerate and pull back on both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, Hari, you said a little scrutiny. I would beg to differ that now more than ever, there is a significant amount of scrutiny, especially as we're heading into, a different time that obviously we're adapting to. And while you all have so much in common, one of the things that you definitely have in common is that each of your organizations have been able to implement operational best practices when it comes to centralizing and standardizing the way you manage plans and budgets and account for that spend, giving the organization that high level visibility into not only how much are we spending, but where are we investing? And if things change, can we make a decision on the fly to reallocate dollars to, for example, a channel or a program that might be performing much better given the climate. So one of the things that we always, my team and I, when I say we, my teams and I, is really kind of, can't say it enough, that foundation to having a single source of truth, so that when marketing is looking at spend and then finance is looking at spend, then we're looking at the same number. And so a lot of the challenges that we're seeing right now with marketing organizations are anywhere companies have an annual budget of 20 million up to upwards of $100 million in budget. And what we're seeing is that they are lacking the visibility because they don't have that real-time visibility into what they have spent and where the dollars can be reallocated. So of course, when we think about, what if we were to overspend, right? And we always think there's a concern with overspending. We actually are seeing more organizations get into a position where they're underspending their budgets because they can't track each and every dollar. And so I think one of the things that we want to definitely communicate is how important that foundational layer is in order to build on top of that. I have another question. What do you think are the most important skills to bring to a chief of staff role? Sounds as if there's a critical skill needed that would be around ability to build relationships, being center of influence, etc. What are some of the skills, competencies that you've developed or just came into this role with that you would say are specific to this core role?
I think that the question, I'll go first. The question says that the relationship and influence, in my perspective, would be number one. I think one of the key areas is to lead without power. So you're sitting at a marketing leadership table where, again, that executive alignment, it's with peers. It's, you got to manage upward, you got to manage downward. Those are probably their own skills, but managing laterally and really aligning peers and a leadership team. It's probably one of the number one skills, I would say.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that, having that relationship management. My CMO frequently refers to me as his eyes and ears. I like to be the person that is approached. If there's for any reason, if the CMO is unavailable, I tend to be the first person that gets reached out to in order to get some of those solutions across. And I would also say making sure that we protect the CMO's time. So being very aware of the priorities and making sure that that's managed. And all of these are soft skills, right? This is not something that you would necessarily see on a resume. I make friends is generally not something that, that we like to put on our resume or LinkedIn. But at the end of the day, that's really what it comes down to, is making sure that you are approachable, having a good communication style, and having that relationship management, and seeing where there's areas that maybe you need to invest in from a human aspect.
Yeah, Hari?
I can't agree more with what Cameron and Monica said. I think the person who asked the question, I think it was Michael, he's actually thinking through the question they will be answering at the very end of the call. So I'm happy to double click into that aspect of, what are the types of chiefs of staff, and like, which one do you like to be? And one thing that I'll say is there's no one chief of staff profile that's a ideal archetype. It's highly dependent. So we'll double click into that in a little bit.
Yeah. I imagine, right, there has to be like a fine line between, again, building strong relationships, being, establishing credibility and trust across the entire organization, but also being very tactical in your conviction of like, this is what we have to do. And again, sometimes you have to disturb the status quo in order to make changes and drive innovation or progress. So interesting. One of the things that we spend a lot of time focusing on, again, is cross-functional collaboration and alignment. And one of the things that is right now front and center is this alignment between marketing and finance. Would love to hear your perspectives on what that relationship is or should be in an ideal world, where you're coming from, and what role do you play in ensuring that partnership across the board?
I'm happy to take this one first. I think as a chief of staff, I partner with my finance counterpart who manages marketing finance very closely. He is sort of the counselor to the CMO around finances. If you think of CMO as sort of the CEO of the marketing organization, the marketing finance partner is essentially the CFO who guides and advises. And I think the frequent check-ins and the frequent reviews that we have in place as a cadence helps us to kind of think through the spending, the returns and investment and things of that nature. And being able to do that in a live manner is very important, because one thing is you might have overspent in a huge area, but if you were to find out a couple of weeks later, it might be too late. So having that dynamic and closely aligned relationship that we can really drive the right agenda in parallel is very important.
Cameron?
Sure. For us, the model is a bit different, where we have a financial planning person sitting within marketing ops. And that person serves as, if you want, the translator between marketing and finance, because naturally finance speaks the financial lingo. They're set by a certain rule, governance, and that doesn't always align to the marketing view, which is you got to have those lens of, all right, if I don't know, if a campaign spend is a month delayed and that crosses a quarter, that doesn't mean we're doing X amount better. It's just a shift. Whereas finance might just see it, all right, we're 100K better now. No, it's not. It just got shifted by a week. So we added this role about 4 or 5 years ago, and we've seen a huge amount of value in having that kind of translation between finance and marketing sitting within marketing ops.
Yeah, and one of the things that we are seeing often within our customer base, of course, and across the board is more of a marketing specific FP&A or finance partner who, and again, we've almost constructed that there's this unwritten like animosity between marketing and finance, and oh no, like budgets are being cut. And I can guarantee you that no finance executive wants to cut budget from the marketing side, because they know you have to spend in order to execute on your campaigns, on your strategies, bringing in obviously growth and revenue into the company. So having that partner on the finance side, what we've seen is just another element that strengthens the partnership. And again, the trust and credibility that marketing has within that organization.
I'll add one point there. And if you look at it, probably 5 years ago, the relationship everyone was talking about was a CMO CIO. And that was on MarTech really taking over. We talked about how the role and the scope of marketing is expanding, and really it's now around corporate and business objectives. And that fully aligned to this dual relationship, having now switched from the CIO to a CFO, which has a broader context.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also one of the most enlightening moments in my early conversations with the finance partner, whom I adore, and he's an amazing finance leader, is when we're going through budgets and thinking through some of the spikes in areas that didn't make sense to me. My question was, did you recommend that we don't spend in that area? And his answer to me was, that's for the marketing leaders to make, not for finance to guide or advise on where they should be spending more or less. So how, as a chief of staff, my question became, how do I become that translator between, as we look through the spend and as we look through the marketing objectives, that I can help translate those finance, the key highlights from finance's perspective into marketing, so that we can actually have the right budget allocation and investment mix. So I think, building a strong partnership in that with the finance partner, whether they sit within your organization like Cameron's, which I think is also very fascinating, or if they sit within, FP&A or the finance team, that close alignment is incredibly important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I communicate with our finance partner probably daily, and we have a very transparent marketing budget visibility. And we make sure that any access to any of the tools that we have within marketing to see any of the budget spend, that visibility and transparency is always available. And making sure that, if there's any question, confusion, that is a very high priority to clarify very quickly.
Yes, we could schedule an entire conversation just in terms of how much more efficient an organization can run when there's more transparency across marketing and finance. Dan, I know you and your teams work and consult with various different organizations across B2B, specifically tech, much of which my team, for example, focuses on as well. It seems that obviously, given all of the disruptions that we are kind of becoming more used to and trying to navigate, that bridging the gap between marketing strategy and execution is becoming more difficult. And so what are you seeing within your clients' environment? What types of approaches are they taking to prepare for, obviously, a year, like going back a few years, it's requiring some more proactivity and less reactivity. So what can you share with the audience, just in terms of what you and your teams are seeing more?
I think the chief of staff role plays a key role in the next 3 to 6 months. And the strategy is often too abstract and high level, so it becomes impossible to operationalize. And there's not enough resources, time, capacity in the organization. So the chief of staff can be the key link between the strategy and the operations. So when I sit down with chief of staffs, the agenda is planning and budgeting the marketing programs for the next quarter, what resources are available, and what's the hiring plan, what work makes sense to be done internally versus the agency, prioritizing the strategic projects and what resources are needed. Companies we work with see us as an extension of their team to accelerate projects. So prioritization is very important. Also on the vendor side, like marketing technology stack optimization, it's usually with the chief of staffs, we find a lot of overlapping solutions and vendors. We look at consolidation where needed. We make sure that the teams in the organizations are enabled with the tools, different. And then again, what expertise is available internally and what can the agency bring to the table when it makes sense to be outsourced. That's how we bridge the gap between the strategy and the execution in our work with chief of staff.
Yeah, and one thing that obviously we think about a lot is the organizations that are unfortunately being impacted, and certain teams are being laid off, or they're just deciding that we have to operate more lean. Again, one of the things that probably is more behind the scenes is like preparing for that inevitability of organizations saying, hey, listen, in order for us to continue doing what we need to do and execute on X, Y, and Z next year, we have to account for capacity planning, right? We have to account for headcount reductions and this kind of notion of like doing more with less people, for example, or less budget, definitely less time. And the other thing that we hear a lot from our prospective customers is right now they're heads down looking at their current stack and auditing and seeing where are their overlaps, where are their redundancies, and how can we better automate and integrate across the board. So I don't know if this is something, Cameron, Hari, Monica, that in terms of a current state analysis of where the tech stack is sitting, or even potentially where do we want to invest more heavily in from a technology perspective. Is there anything you guys want to share on that?
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, we just recently went through an audit on our entire tech stack and really looking at the budget that was spent. Are we getting the ROI from every single line item? Are we using it? What's the usage report? And going through that exercise can be really enlightening, and making sure that those redundancies are avoided, making sure that if there's any optimizations that we can use from some different features maybe that have not been enabled. So we're certainly going through that audit right now, and it's really, really beneficial to making sure that we are using and leveraging every tool we have.
Yeah, I echo the same thing, and I think MarTech is an interesting dynamic. I think when you look back, a lot of the tools come in with a promise of automation, and you bring them on, and then 2 years later, look, yes, it brought the automation, but you had to bring people to run the tool. Yeah. So it's like, all right, now I invested in the tool and the person to run the tool, and before you know it, if you look back at the true cost, it's like, okay, maybe it didn't bring the promise and the overlap. Again, I don't even know, we're at 8,000, 10,000, 15,000 in that report that shows the number of MarTech. But I think it's absolutely necessary to have a periodic review of, all right, everything was brought in with the good intention. Did it go where it was supposed to go? Did it bring in the efficiencies? So yeah, we're, again, same thing. I think it's not yet as part of our annual planning, but I could see eventually being an audit of tech stack being part of that. So.
And Hari, before you share your perspectives on this, I do want to share that the reality is, and this is us as a vendor in the MarTech space, that the stickiness, and when I say stickiness, I think historically what's happened is a lot of marketing teams have went out to market and purchased tools and technologies in silos without consulting or bringing in other cross-functional groups. And so what we see firsthand is it's imperative that marketing bring everyone to the table, including finance, including IT, including obviously the executive sponsor, who then has complete oversight and is thinking about the broader impact of the business challenges that we're trying to solve. And is this software or technology going to do that for us as an entire organization? So again, bring everyone to the table. And it's really common, right? My teams and I will help support and guide a group upwards of 10, 12, 15 stakeholders who really are being much more intentional about making these investments and thinking about long-term returns. So all that to say, being friends with those people, those teams, is really important, not just for that superficiality of it, but for driving impact across the organization. Sorry, Hari, go ahead.
No, thank you for the perspective. That's actually really helpful. And I'm not as close to the MarTech side as Cameron or Monica maybe, but we actually did recently modernize our MarTech stack. And one thing I can say is it is a huge investment. As we look at overall marketing program dollar spend, we actually had to fund it out of marketing rather than, IT budget or wherever else. And seeing the huge chunk of investment in MarTech to really modernize and upgrade our stack, yes, there are promises of efficiency gain, productivity increase and all of that, but it's a huge number. And I could see how, Cameron and Monica's perspective around auditing has the importance of auditing and ensuring that it's actually bringing the right returns is actually very true.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so it's probably comes to no surprise that there are potentially people out there that are doing the chief of staff role, but just they don't have the title of chief of staff. What advice can you give people who are listening now and in the future, whether they are exploring this type of role or if they are currently in a marketing operations role and really giving a lot of consideration as to what's next for them in their career? What advice do you have for them? Monica?
Sure. So I think we kind of touched upon it a little bit earlier, but I would definitely say the hard skills are certainly important, absolutely. But equally as important are those soft skills, making sure that you can navigate through some of those thorny scenarios and situations. Sometimes we have to deliver some not so awesome news, right? So we have to be able to have the decorum, have the ability to communicate some of these situations and have that, relationship management ability. So I would certainly say that if this is an area that you are interested in, raise your hand, talk to somebody in HR about this role and see if it's something that could potentially become a role within your current organization or start to reach out and look at some of those job recs and see if that's something you're really interested in.
Yeah, because I mean, honestly, a lot of these chiefs of staff most likely have had to carve out this role. And it's like they're the first chief of staff within this capacity. So that's awesome. Awesome advice. Thanks, Monica.
Sure.
And we touched on commonality. I'm sure if we double click on just the three of us from a chief of staff role perspective, we'll see a huge degree of difference. To me, again, we covered pretty well the hard skill. The soft skills is to be successful or for this to work. I think number one, there has to be a complementary skills to the CMO. I think the chief of staff should bring, again, beside that blind spot view and overall alignment, skills that CMO, like everyone else, are not perfect. They have their areas they're strong, their areas they're not. And when chief of staff feels that part, it's important. The other part that's really important in my view is to have that open and tight relationship, almost at a personal level, because you got to be aligned in decisions that you make. Because again, some part of our job is make sure some decisions that can be done before making it to their CMO are made, and we make those decisions, but we got to make sure those are aligned to the vision of the CMO, and that becomes a question of trust between the CMO and the chief of staff. At the same time, we should not fall into a tunnel vision of like, well, I just got to do it. That's what I mean by that open relationship of, yes,
Right.
You're an executive leader, but I'm going to challenge you on this decision. Some of your directs lower in the org might not tell you. I'm going to tell you this decision has these impacts so having that frank conversation with the CMO, I think it's also a key part of being successful in the role, and the role having the value it should have. And it's not always easy. That takes a bit of time to build from a personal perspective.
I'm reminded of this Brene Brown quote she has, where it's like, clear is kind, unclear is unkind. And so obviously you're going to be in a position where you're not always in consensus, or you're not always going to agree, and you're going to have to get really comfortable with standing your ground and explaining why might not be the best decision. You kind of alluded to this next question, which I think is a really awesome question. And this is from Thomas. Do you feel the most effective relationships are when the chief of staff balances the skills and expertise of the CMO, for example, right brain, left brain, or emulates the skills and expertise of the CMO? So that balance, or always in tandem?
I'll say absolutely balance. I mean, in tandem, you end up becoming, yes, you probably take stuff off of his plate, but you're not bringing the value to the organization, and you're not bringing that challenge to the CMO of, again, you thought this way, I really think you should think different. And at the end of the decision, it's his, but being able to bring that challenge to me, it's that balance is a lot more important than emulation.
I would agree. That perspective is very important.
Yeah. And again, I think when you get to be in that echelon or that hierarchy, it's your different personalities. I'm just going to say it. There might be some ego. And so a lot of that has to be that you are, again, on the personal side, they know that you have their best interests at heart, and you are looking at it from a unbiased, and that eventually you know that this could be the right decision overall. Hari, any advice from you?
Yeah, I was happy to share. So I think despite this cachet of being tied at the hip with a C-level executive who's very important at the company, chief of staff can be the most ambiguous and flexible role of any kind in anyone's career. And that also means that there are so many different archetypes of chief of staff that you can look for. And I remember going through or reading a McKinsey study that said there are 4 different archetypes of chief of staff. First one being sort of the broker, who's a connected influencer and who can really translate ideas into action. The second one is more of an operator, so who is a savvy operator who can seamlessly handle priorities, processes, and personalities that we mentioned. The third one being sort of the guardian, who really protects their time and reputation of the CMO, who's sort of an advisor and counselor. And the last one being a loyalist, who's sort of a confidant who has known the executive for a very long time. And there are various types, not everyone kind of gets categorized into one. There are a little bit of aspects of each that you kind of become to really mold that chief of staff role. And that really depends on your personality, your skill set, your background, how you balance as executives. And across the 4 different archetypes, and there might be the ones that I'm not mentioning, but being crystal clear on what you're bringing to the table with the CMO or with the executive that you support is incredibly important. Saying, you have this background and this is where I bring to the table. For example, for me, my CMO is a true marketer. She comes from a long-standing career of marketing, but my background is more on the strategy side with in-depth knowledge into the sales world. So I think that's where we sort of balance. And I think personally, I think we all mentioned the personality, chemistry, and cultural fit with the organization is often overlooked to an extent, but we all mentioned that we know that it's important. So typically a very heavy influence role like the chief of staff, where you may have a team, you may have a very small team, or you may not have a team at all, but you sit at the executive table and your peers are marketing executives. It's important that the person can build the relationship to influence the key stakeholders, and champion for initiatives, drive agenda, and so on. And I think another important thing is having that tight relationship with a different function as well. I sort of think of myself as someone who can really be the whisperer of the sales organization, understanding how they work and bringing that to the table for the marketing side. And it typically works well when chief of staff could be an internal hire, and has been with the organization, who kind of know where the dead bodies are buried, who's sort of a proven entity. But if external, ensuring that these qualities are met is also important through the interviews and through the conversations with the folks that are on the interview panel. So that's sort of my 2 cents on the role and what it could be.
You tugged at my heartstrings, because obviously coming from the sales organization, we want nothing more than our voice to be heard, and for us to be able to have that alignment and collaboration with our partners in marketing. I would love if you could share that McKinsey report, Hari, so that as the follow-up email to all the registrants and attendees, I can share that with them as well. We are down to time, but I do have one last question from someone very special within our organization, our own CMO, Jim. Obviously, it's going to be natural that you form this bond or this connection with your CMO. And sometimes maybe they drive you a little crazy, maybe, I don't know, I'll just assume. But how often would you say you interface with them, like you're meeting with them? And other than them, who is another partner or executive that you do spend more time with? Monica?
Sure. Yeah, I meet with my CMO pretty much daily. Sometimes it can be for a full hour. If, like, right now we're in the thick of it for refining budget for 2023 and making some plan Bs, right? So right now it is, we're constantly interfacing. But on any other time, it's probably 15 minutes a day. And outside of the CMO, I frequently interact with our CRO and CFO and VP Finance.
Okay, awesome. Cameron?
Obviously, there's seasonality to it, like Monica mentioned, depending if it's planning season or not. If not regularly, I have a 1 hour weekly that, again, that's more structured. Here or what we're looking for next week and the past week, and a lot of ad hoc. That's on a daily basis. And that, again, if you go to our IM window, often it's like call ? And that follows by a call, just to make sure either we call. So that happens on a daily basis. Absolutely.
Okay, Hari?
Yeah, so I also have a weekly one-on-one that's structured, just as my CMO meets at her directs on a weekly basis. And I actually have weekly meetings with all of the directs, meaning my peers. So all the VPs of marketing that I meet with on a weekly basis, as well as finance partner on a biweekly and the HRBP on a biweekly basis as well. And in addition to meeting with my manager CMO on a weekly basis, there are multiple meetings throughout the week that I'm also part of with her as well. So interactions, as Monica mentioned, are actually daily, but official meeting, it'll be weekly to touch point on key projects and things of that nature.
Okay. All right. So much gratitude to all of you for making the time to connect with us and share a little bit about yourselves and your reality. I urge all the guests here and attendees, reach out to us, connect with one another over LinkedIn. You never know who can help in terms of provide insights and knowledge, and be a resource. So keep an eye out, folks. I will be following up with an email with just a short survey, as well as some of the resources we discussed. And yes, of course, if you are interested in learning anything more about how we support similar organizations, reach out. Our door is always open. Again, thank you very much, everyone. If we don't connect before, have a wonderful holiday with your friends and family, much deserved rest and relaxation. And yeah, we'll see you folks later.
Thank you,
Wonderful.
everyone.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.